So, folks, you got to take a look at this story. And when I first read the headline, I almost thought it was like a joke. I almost thought it was like a cartoon or like a satirical piece. But, in this day and age, in 2025, anything could be a headline. Anything crazy and wild could be a headline, including something like this. This is from the Canadian National Observer, where they state Toronto area emissions rise as Ontario burns more natural gas. They should really change the publication to the National Obvious, not the Observer. Oh my God, Ontario is burning more natural gas and it's actually causing carbon emissions. The shock, the horror. Chimneys produce smoke. Alarming, breaking news. Crazy. And they make this a national epidemic because, oh my God, emissions are polluting the GTA. Which, if anyone knows about the GTA, if anyone knows about Toronto, Hamilton, Burlington, in that area, there's a reason why it's nicknamed the Big Smoke. And it's not because Torontonians are fancy of cigars. Let's just say that. But this is a legit headline, folks, and I had to take a dive at this. A new analysis has found that emissions in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area rose last year, and that a main driver of the uptick was the provincial government's continued prioritization of natural gas over renewable energy. The carbon emissions inventory released today by the Atmospheric Fund found that the emissions went up 1% in 2024, while the increase is slight. It comes in the context of emissions needing to go down by 11% each year to reach 2030 climate goals, explained Brian Purcell, Vice President of Policy and Programs at TAF. Buildings and transportation make up the lion's share of emissions in the region. The former is partly due to natural gas that is being used for heating, while an uptick in car travel as more people return to in-person work led to transportation emissions increasing by 1%. The analysts found that emissions from residential and commercial buildings decreased, which can be traced back to both a warmer winter and energy-efficient improvements. But overall, emissions from buildings went up nearly 2%, mostly from the industrial sector. So, what exactly is, the outcome of this? Do you want residents to freeze? Are we not allowed to take our cars anywhere? Is that, is this the, manufacturing consent to why we need 15-minute cities, why you can't leave your house, why you need a carbon credit system, which is already being implemented? Is this trying to scare people to say, oh my God, you guys at home that are heating yourselves, trying to keep warm this winter, which if anyone knows about a Canadian winter, it's long, it's dark, it's cold, it's wet. I mean, we're already dealing with daylight savings time where it's already dark at 5 o'clock. What is up with that? And now you're telling people that, hey, maybe you got to freeze a bit more this winter because emissions are going up. Maybe we should take it upon the European nations when they blew up the pipeline coming from Russia, the Nord Stream 2, and all the European nations froze during the winter. Maybe we should take it upon them. Although I shouldn't say too much because I don't want to give our nasty politicians any ideas. You know what I mean? It's so crazy. It's so crazy. It's so ludicrous. And I get that, you're worried about pollution. You're worried about the climate. You're worried about the environment. I am too. But compared to what we have discovered, what we have dove into, what we have researched, and what they're leaving out of this conversation, they're not talking about private jets. They're not blaming Ottawa for their extensive use of their emissions. How many Cadillacs and Escalades do they need to take the prime minister to a private event? Or how many times that Mark Carney has traveled around the world and, making fake, phony trade deals with countries and leaving up with nothing. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about the emissions from that. But we talk about how you, the average citizen that's going to work, that's busting their ass, that's trying to pay their bills, that's trying to heat their homes for themselves and their family, you are the problem. You guys are causing disturbance to the planet. Not the 1%. Not Bill Gates, not Warren Buffett, not Jeff Bezos, not Mark Zuckerberg, who has another yacht with 4 industrial-sized diesel engines, a giant yacht that's, I think they said was about equivalent to 3 football fields. That's crazy. But we're not angry at them. We're not angry at them because they're supposedly environmentalists. They care about the planet. But this is alarming. This is alarming, according to the National Observer here. So here's, they do this little graph here. I apologize why it's doing that. It's kind of weird how it's like pulsating. That's just the computer here. Emissions breakdown in the Greater Toronto Area by sector. So you can see they kind of broke it down. There's 45% of it from buildings, 37% of it transportation, 14% industry. And if anyone knows about Burlington, if you ever go over the Burlington Sky Bridge, which I have done numerous times going back and forth from college, you could tell you're in Burlington just from the smell. No offense. No offense. There are good people in Burlington, but you could tell where you are in that area just from rolling down the windows. 3% by waste, and I think that's supposed to be a small smidge of that is agriculture, which, again, agriculture has a tiny percentage when it comes to the emissions, but yet they demonize farmers the most. They demonize farmers the most. They want, to stop the production of cattle. They want you to eat less beef. They want you to go to bugs. They want to make synthetic beef. That has nothing to do with the climate. That has nothing to do with the climate because even their own research conducts and proves that agriculture is the least of problems. The least of problems. So why are we villainizing farmers for doing their job, which their profession is the most eco-conscious profession on earth? They have to rely on the climate. They have to rely on, weather patterns. They have to understand what's good for the environment, what's bad for the environment. They're the most eco-conscious profession on earth compared to the billionaires that are coming up with these studies. That increase was really due to our electricity supply becoming dirtier last year. Well explained. In Ontario, emissions associated with electricity generation from natural gas power plants went up 25% in 2024. They doubled since 2020 and quadrupled since 2017. Not just the building sector emissions would have been down, but overall emissions would have increased this year if not for the slightly increase in electricity generation emissions, he said. He notes that Doug Ford's fall economic statement from earlier this month eliminated a requirement for the province to set emissions reduction targets and publish a climate plan, and that the province has prioritized gas plants in its latest and largest yet round of energy procurement. Oh, you mean the phony numbers that we can never get to? That, the Paris Climate Accord, the manufacturing of all these numbers that, we're going to get to a net zero economy, which is never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Net zero is actually a killer. Net zero is actually a killer. You need carbon emissions for life on Earth. That's basic biology. That's basic biology. How do you think trees exist? How do you think plants exist? How do you think you grow your vegetables? You need carbon emissions. So net zero is impossible. And we were already at a net zero state in this country because of our forests, because of our resources, because of our agricultural sector. But now it's getting worse because the politicians took it upon themselves to use climate as an excuse to demonize farmers, to demonize the real natural observers, the people that actually know a thing or two about the environment. So here's the let me go to this here. So here's that guy here, Brian Precurl. Here's him on what's it called here? Blue Sky? That's what it's called. That's the liberal Twitter, the other Twitter. Says not just the building sector emissions would have gone down, but overall emissions would have increased this year if not for significant increases in electricity generation emissions, said Brian Precurl. Although municipalities don't control the electricity system, they have the power to greenlight or veto electricity generation projects, such as gas power plants, battery storage projects proposed within their bounds. They're also major landlords, said Precurl. So they can look to maximize renewable energy and storage in their own rooftops and buildings, and they can help homeowners and businesses in their communities to do the same. Yeah, but they didn't. They didn't. Look how much money. Look at Ontario, for example, and how much money the government wasted in trying to bring battery manufacturing for electric vehicles into the province, and has failed every single time. They either pull out, the company either goes bankrupt, or they realize that, hey, if we're going to conduct this giant battery facility to make electric vehicles, we're going to have to build a power plant next to it to run the factory. Which kind of goes against the whole reducing emissions, making things greener. So, understand that. Understand that. And this is why a lot of municipalities are saying, no, we're not doing this. No, we're not doing this. No, we're not carving out more, usable farmland for solar generation when solar panels can just easily be attached to buildings. I thought that was the whole plan. I thought that was the whole purpose of solar panels. That's why, at first, I thought it was a great idea. Individual homes, individual buildings can produce their own energy. Oh, of course not. Of course not. We're not going to allow people to have that freedom, have that ability to produce their own energy. God, no. We're going to get a private corporation to exile a bunch of farmland, make a solar farm out of that, killing off feasible, usable, fertile soil that can be used to produce more crops, kill that off with this solar farm that is going to generate whatever amount of energy, and then transmit that to towns and cities at a high cost. Instead of giving people the ability to produce solar panels in their own homes, to actually go off grid so they can actually generate their own electricity. It's such a phenomenon, this whole climate change initiative. It's such a mask off moment, ladies and gentlemen. And considering that at the start, I was very much on the side of the climate agenda. I'm still kind of for the environment. I'm still for, nature and preservation of agriculture, and, we don't want to kill off as trees and plants and so on and so forth. I'm still part of that. But I don't trust the so-called experts or science coming from delinquents that don't understand anything about nature. When it comes to people like Bill Gates, who say that planting trees is nothing. We can't plant trees. In fact, we got to kill more trees to save the planet. How idiotic that sounds. You got to kill more trees to save the planet. How do you think oxygen is made, dumbass? Seriously. In a statement to Canada's National Observer, the City of Toronto said it will continue to work with all levels of government and the private sector to meet its emissions targets of a 65% reduction by 2030. Yet, that's never going to happen. These are all lies. These are all lies. And considering the fact that you're saying you're going to work with all levels of government and the private sector, that's why it's not going to work. Because the private sector is not going to give a damn. The governments are going to try and use bureaucracy to try to pressure the private sector. They're just going to partner up with the private sector. And once again, the fascism team goes after you. You are the problem. You're the one that has to give up your car. You're the one that has to give up your travel plans. You're the one that has to cut down on your food consumption. You're the one that's going to need to have climate limits. and carbon emission banks. You're the one. So all this is just it's just hyper it's just hyper partisan BS. Absolutely just hypocritical BS. It pointed to its strategies for net zero buildings and plans to transition its transit fleet to net zero by 2040. Again, such falsehoods. Such falsehoods. And this guy even points this out, which I thought was really smart of him to do this. Marty up north says it's like they're daring us to do it. It also shows how ignorant they are, meaning the government, meaning the National Observer that wrote that stupid article. Ontario would be absolutely effed within days, if not hours, if we shut off the Trans-Canada main line and stop sending them natural gas. Exactly. And this is what I've been saying since we knew about Alberta planning to separate from Canada. Ever since the separation movement started in Alberta, this is what I've been saying. That Canada needs Alberta as much as Alberta actually needs Canada. And there needs to be a partnership. There needs to be cooperation with the province and the rest of the country, because that province is strategically in line to helping the nation. And if we lose Alberta, if we lose the energy sector that it produces and gives to the rest of the country, then places like Ontario, Quebec, the Atlantic provinces, even the Prairie provinces, they all get screwed. They all get screwed. So this back and forth aggression is not helping. Just like the trade wars, people don't realize we actually need the United States, and the United States kind of needs us. So this trade war back and forth to think that, oh, we're going to succeed from the United States and look to European nations, look to Asian communities to do our trading with, is absolutely bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. And they're doing this deliberately. They're doing this deliberately to destroy this Western community that we have built for many, many years. They're doing this intentionally to manufacture aggression so we get angry at each other and not realize that the billionaire class, people like Mark Carney, the central banker who positioned himself to be prime minister, is deliberately doing this as part of his hideous agenda. He wants to destroy Canada. He wants to destroy the fabric and the tone and the society and the relations with of Canada and the rest of the world. He's doing this intentionally to destroy the reputation of Canada and turn us into a vessel state for globalization, for the WEF. And if you don't believe me, go take a look at his book Values, because it's really detailed exactly what kind of leadership style Mark Carney has and what he's doing to this country. And I bet you the people that voted for him have no idea that Mark Carney even produced a book. I'm pretty sure they have no idea that a book even exists. We're sending them billions of cubic feet of natural gas every day. Gas that's used to heat homes and as to feed feedstock for petrochemicals like methanol. So, again, this is why having Alberta part of Canada is so vital. And people need to take this seriously. People need to understand that tearing the fabric between Canada and Alberta is problematic. There's so many people out there that are like, oh, well, it's Alberta. They can, get out of this country because they're not cooperating with us. They're not in line with the elbows up. They're teaming up with Donald Trump in America. So go live their passion. You're basically allowing the Canadian government, Mark Carney, to screw all these provinces out of the ability to heat their homes, to cook their food, for industries to create products, because Alberta is going to take their natural energy, their energy reserves, which is why that province is so crucial to the rest of the country. They're going to take it with them, and Canada's going to be screwed. So that's why all this back and forth tension, the separation of Alberta from Canada, we need to come to a resolution. We need actual cooperation, consideration. We got to look into Alberta and come to some sort of negotiation relation between the Premier, Daniel Smith, and Mark Carney. And I mean real negotiations, not theatrics, not this bullshit where you go on press tours and pretend that you give a damn because, oh, Mark Carney's from somewhere around there. We don't know for sure. But actual negotiations. And in tie with that, I want to show this. This is from the Canadian Dimension. And this is actually a pretty good publication. If people want to check this out. And Dimension. Because they wrote this. It says, Ontario facing high costs and high-risk nuclear future. So one of the things that Doug Ford and the province of Ontario is trying to say about this is their new hype that they're doing, is they're trying to look at investing into nuclear power plants, which some people say it's good and bad. There's good opportunities when it comes to nuclear power. There's bad opportunities when it comes to nuclear power. I would say when it comes to any means of energy production, there's always going to be good and bad, even with, renewable energies. Like we talk about with electric vehicles. They have to blow up a mine this big to get a bunch of critical minerals, and they're using slave labor, particularly in places like Africa, to steal the parts for those electric batteries. So is it actually beneficial for the planet? Not exactly. Not exactly. So there's good and bad in all areas when it comes to energy production. Behind Doug Ford's big nuclear plans, push lies a hidden price tag that could undermine the province's economic and climate future. So they say carefully buried on the Friday of Halloween and overshadowed by the buildup for the Toronto Blue Jays World Series games over that weekend was an announcement by the Ontario Energy Board that the electricity generation costs charged to consumers would increase by 29% on November 1st. Did you hear about this? Because I don't think I heard about this till now. 29%. A spike in energy costs as they're already dealing with inflation, as people are already struggling to buy food and groceries and necessities. 29%. Just to get natural oil and natural gas from Alberta. And a lot of it's because, again, Mark Carney and the crazy lunatic federal government is trying to destroy the energy sector. They're not investing into it. They're not making it better and more feasible, which there are opportunities to do that and actually make it beneficial and not damaging when it comes to emissions. But Mark Carney's turning a blind eye. Why? Because his whole set goal is this net zero catastrophe. And if you read his book, again, highly recommend go read some pages. Go look at some chapters. And you'll understand exactly what's happening here. Sensitive to the politics of electricity rates, the issue on which Premier Doug Ford's government won its first mandate in 2018, the announcement was accompanied by near doubling from 13.1% to 23.5% of the Ontario electricity rebate program. The move seems to designed to hide the cost of increase from consumers by increasing the subsidization of electricity rates through general revenues. The additional annual cost of the subsidy increase has been estimated in the range of $2 billion, bringing the total expenditure to approximately $8.5 billion per year. These are tax revenues that otherwise could be spent on core public services. The total cost of the province's electricity subsidies are now equivalent to of nearly 2/3 of its $13.5 billion deficit, exceeding total expenditures on the justice sector and are almost doubled in capital expenditures on healthcare and education for the coming year. Well, thank God, we're able to sort healthcare through MAID and go tell people that they're worthless and here's a pamphlet to, self-delete yourself. And education, well, they're just going to point kids towards a YouTube screen. Because sadly, you'll get a better education than the public school system. because of how much it's failing because of this. Beyond its immediate costs, these subsidies have the perverse effect of providing the largest payouts to the biggest consumers of electricity, typically higher income households. A more targeted strategy could deliver relief to the lower income and rural households least able to pay additional energy costs with a much lower hit to the provincial treasury. The increase in electricity prices is largely attributed to higher nuclear generation costs, along with unexpectedly higher spending on energy conservation. The latter may be explained by the greater uptake of the provincial home energy retrofit programs following the expiry of federal funding for home energy efficiency renovations under the Canadian Greener Homes program. The increase in nuclear generation costs represents a much more serious long-term problem for Ontario taxpayers and electricity ratepayers. The province has embarked on a massive nuclear expansion and refurbishment program with the intention of increasing the portion of nuclear generation in Ontario from 50 to 70% of electricity output. In addition to refurbishment of existing reactors at the Bruce, Darlington, and potentially the Pickering B sites, the province is proposing a $10,000 megawatt, 10,000 megawatt new build nuclear project near Wesleyville between Cobourg and Kingston, as well as a new 4,800 megawatt facility at the Bruce nuclear site. There's also a plan to build 4 300 megawatt small modular reactors at Darlington. Construction of the first unit is already underway. Independent estimates of the cost of this program based on past results, as well as recent experiences and assessments in United States, Europe, and United Kingdom, are in the range of $400 billion. So, I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a rocket scientist. But I think the numbers speak for itself. I think the numbers kind of make it clear that this is not going to be feasible. This is not feasible. And once again, just like all the money that they wasted on trying to bring battery production facilities to the province, it seems like this is going to be another letdown. That, oh, we're going to be building these nuclear facilities. That's great. Except one problem. Where's that money coming from? Because it'd be one thing if we had a strong energy facility, had a strong energy sector, and the country was producing and gaining revenue, and they could use part of that revenue to expand the energy production in nuclear facilities. That's one thing. But when you're doing the exact opposite, we're losing money, we're not generating revenue for the province or for the country, and you're saying that all these sites are already underway, and it's going to cost billions of dollars in more taxpayer money, meaning that energy rates are going to skyrocket, meaning all this uptake that people cannot afford. That is damaging. That is damaging. And you wonder why people are frustrated when it comes to these ridiculous programs. It's not because they're anti-science or they're climate denialists. It's not that. It's because they know it's not feasible. They know it's not feasible. Look how much money was invested into bringing battery production, into building solar farms, into all this renewable energy. They said in 2015, when Justin Trudeau got elected, they said how much of a powerhouse Canada was going to be under renewable energy. Well, here we are 10 years later after the fact. Trudeau's gone. Now here's Mark Carney. Nothing's happened. Nothing's happened. Even all the revenue that they generated through the ridiculous carbon taxes. Where's that money? Where's that money gone to? Because I thought that was supposed to be part of this. I thought that money was supposed to go towards investments in nuclear technology, investments into renewable sources. And apparently, the federal government has no idea where the money is. But of course, they're going to spend more money on this. They're going to spend more money on Ukraine. They're going to spend more money elsewhere and destroy more lives of Canadians. and making you the problem, which is why the National Observer, the joke that's become, did that stupid headline, did that stupid clickbait article about how Torontonians are causing more emissions because they're heating their homes. Oh my God. How crazy. Here's also something to take note of. And this is why someone like me, who still believes in, environment and helping the planet, does not see the light in this. Because Savvy points out, the metallic sun is killing everything. Take a drive on the 401 east of Toronto. 90% of the beautiful pine trees are dead and dying. Brown and yellow pine for miles and miles. Hours of death. Chemical spray is destroying all life. Few care. Yeah. Where's the National Observer when it came to all the geoengineering that they're putting onto the province? Where's the outcry for all the emissions, that pollutions, all these harmful chemicals, that the geoengineering, that jet fuel by private jets? They're not concerned about that, but they're concerned about you. They're telling you that because you're heating your home, because you're feeding your family, because you're doing the honest work of an honest citizen, you're at fault. You're the one that has to change, not the top 1%. Not the people that are actually causing more emissions. Because if you actually look at the data, you look at the other science that they're not presenting to you, you understand that you're not at fault in any of this. In fact, most of the carbon emissions come from politicians. They come from the military. Hence why maybe we should cut back on the military spending around the world and focus on domestic issues. That would be a win-win-win for everybody. But you know who wouldn't be a win for? The private contractors, the people that are extorting their powers using climate change as their front. Just like that documentary Michael Moore produced. It's all a front. It's all theatrics. It's all there to look like they care about the planet, but actually, they don't care about anything. They care about the revenue it creates and generates. And here's just to remind people, we've shown this numerous times before, just want to highlight again, that carbon dioxide is actually a good thing. Every time you hear about carbon dioxide and carbon emissions increasing, remember this from NASA. Carbon dioxide fertilization greening Earth study finds. Oh my God. Yeah, we had to go to NASA to learn basic biology, ladies and gentlemen. Because apparently all the scientists forgot about that. Apparently all the scientists missed first grade, where you planted a bean sprout or a crop or a tree or whatever the case may be, and then that plant through photosynthesis generates oxygen by eating up the carbon, which is a net zero. That's how you make things net zero. And notice Mark Carney has never proposed any of that. They're not telling you to plant more trees. They're not telling you to grow more food. They're not telling you any of that. But they're telling you to destroy more of the country. Take more money out of the pockets of hardworking Canadians for this mindless stupidity. For the fact that we know this is going to be a failure. This is just another cost burden onto hardworking Canadians, just like we saw in the last how many years that they tried to bring in, battery production facilities into Ontario. Oh, it's a jobs creator. Oh, that's great. Well, where's the plants? Oh, I forgot to mention, the company went bankrupt. Oh, I forgot to mention that we have to also create a power plant to generate electric vehicle batteries. So that money we took from you, kind of gone. Just a big, giant waste. And maybe it'd be a better opportunity if we just taught people, hey, just plant more trees. Grow some gardens. You can actually do this in your own backyard. You don't need the government involved in it. But, of course, they will never say that because there's no revenue stream to it.